Dr. Booth, what inspired you to start to practice in the first place?
It's strange that when I was probably 12 or 13 years old, a good friend of my mom's came to me, and I was always the kid who fixed stuff. I'd put this together, fix that, untangle that. I was always the one, and we were good friends. And she said, Rick, you ought to be a dentist. You're always fixing stuff. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds pretty good. Said, and you ought to be an orthodontist. They do good. And I said, okay. And the weirdest thing is that that's all it took. I never did any research on it. I didn't visit dentists. I didn't do anything special. It just honestly was truly meant to be. If there was anything, I mean, if it's divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, but that was what it took. I never had any other ideas or any thoughts. In fact, at one point I was scared to death. I hadn't done enough to get in, and it really worried me because and when I got to dental school, honestly, it's like I died and gone to heaven. It was just exactly what I was meant to do. So that's kind of how it got started, and it's always just been perfect for me.
Oh, that's such a good story. So really, it was that first initial prompt that got your mind going in that direction, and it just felt right.
Yeah, it's all it was. It just felt right. And like I say, I mean, there's nothing that makes any sense to it other than it was just kind of meant to be. But I do love to work with my hands. I love to fix things, everything that has to do with dentistry, are the things that I do, even in hobby time now. I love to, I build furniture, I do sculpture, I do wood carving, so that's the kind of things that I've always done in my office too, fixing little things and fiddling around, loving new tools. And, to me, one of my favorite things is to plan a new project, and I make sure it includes at least one new tool with it so I can buy new tools.
Oh, that's exactly. I tell people that's my excuse for getting new tools. I have to do a project that requires something else.
That's mine too. Oh yeah, I'll build that table for you, but I'm going to have to buy a new router.
So how long did you practice orthodontics? What were some of the most rewarding parts of it?
I practiced 50 years. I got here in Fayetteville in 1971, and so finished in October of 22. So it's actually 51 years. I was at Fort Bragg for 2 years and then set up my practice in 1973. So,
wow, 50 years. So you are connected to the community.
I am.
You must go out and everyone just shakes
your
hand and says,
I've been here a long time, and I've been involved in civic clubs, the Kiwanis Club particularly, and church. Those are the big things that I, spend my time with. Haymountain Methodist Church, so it's a big factor. But yeah, it seems like I go anywhere, and I always see patients that I've treated before. It's kind of fun when I get a little trouble remembering names occasionally, but.
How can I'm sure the number of patients you've seen, it must be, and then they grow up too.
Yeah, I see lots of them, and they're kids, and sometimes the kids are kids now. It's been a long time, but that's one of the most fun things though, is seeing their parents come in, and you've known them since they were little, and then you get to know their children, and so
so you got to meet, you got to treat generations of people.
Yeah, and it's really neat because out in town I'll see them with kids grown up, and it's really neat. And you have long enough as an orthodontist with the ones who want to get to know you. There's some kids that just never say a word, and it's kind of sad. But there's some that are outgoing and sweet and nice, and you get to know them and their families, and you see them out and around, and you know what sports they did and where they went to college and what their brothers and sisters are doing. And so that's a big part of it. That I think that's what makes it different. My son's an oral surgeon, and they're never going to be able to develop a relationship, with a patient.
Because they just see them one time, maybe,
or just one time or two, and they're under sedation. And for us, we get to know them and get to enjoy. And we see them at a time too, where they go from a little gawky kid to a grown up. In a period of several years, they've gone through puberty, and some of the boys grow a foot and a half. And I start off at the beginning of treatment, and they're up to here on me, and I finish, and they're up to here. And one kid, we were taking pictures one day. We had us all lined up, and with my staff and the kid next to me, and I said, "Wow, you're tall." He said, "No, Dr. Booth, you're just short."
Leave it to a kid to say something like that.
Yeah. There are a lot of funny things they say. Oh gosh, I've got a list.
Were there any challenges during your time as an orthodontist that come to mind?
Not professionally, really. Physically, mentally, family wise, that sort of thing. Yes, definitely. Staff wise, I would say.
Well, that's interesting, because I heard your staff has been there for so long. Did it get to a point where it's settled
probably
in?
Any orthodontist is going to say that their biggest challenges have been staff. Anytime, if you have an orthodontist who says, I really don't want to go to work, it's because there's a staff member they're having problems with. And, I'd say most all of my staff, had been with me, and I still call them my staff in my office. I haven't gotten over that yet, because I still love them and still go to visit a fair amount. But I've got 2 of them that were over 40 years, and 3 of them, I'd say 25 years plus. And then I've got a couple of them that's, started recently when we joined MyOrthodontist. But all the others that I had before that have been with me probably 6 or 8 years at a minimum. So we've just really had no turnover for a long, long time.
What do you think your secret sauce was, if someone else is wondering how to do this?
Well, it wasn't me. I won't take credit for it. I've always given credit to a lady who was with the practice. In 1998, I bought Dr. Frank Stout's practice, and his clinical manager, office manager then, was Wanda. And Wanda had been doing it 27 years at the time. And she had the ability to she was the mama. She could take care of these girls. She trained them. In fact, one time she was working with a new staff member, and she spent so much time. I really wanted her to work with me because she had such expertise in certain things that I wanted her to help me at the chair. And I was kind of jealous one day. I was kind of irritated because she was spending so much time with this young woman. And I realized, wow, that's where they bond. And after she spent that much time with them, they would do anything for her, and they just loved her. And she could criticize them, and they might cry, but she could, but they just loved her, and they'd always get over it. She would be the first one on the floor scrubbing if there was dirty work to be done. She always led by example. She'd come to me and say, "Dr. Booth, staff's kind of down now. I think we need a shopping day. Why don't we come get them?" So we'd give them $100, $200 or something, and say, "Go shopping and bring back what you got, this afternoon, so we can talk about it, and have something like that." So she could be the intermediary between me and the staff. Most staff will never tell the doctor what's going on. If there are conflicts or any problems or anything, the doctor's going to be the last one to hear about it. Wanda would know those things, so she was still close enough to them to know that, but she would be able to have the guts to come to me and say, "Hey, this is going on. You need to fix it." To the point of saying, "Dr. Booth, what you said hurt their feelings. I heard you talking to so-and-so, and you did that at the chair in front of a patient, and that really wasn't fair." So she was able to help me learned to become a better leader, to be more compassionate with my staff. So I would say it probably started, with Wanda helping me, become a better person. And from there, I think it was a matter of uh, letting them be in charge, stepping
Really?
back and giving them control of the practice and not second guessing, micromanaging. I'd let them do things and I'd praise them for it, even though it might not have been exactly what I'd have done. If I got out of their way, they would make good choices and do good things. And the longer it went on, the less I had to do. And it got to the point where, if there was any issues to be done, if the computers were out, man, I'd just go the other direction, step out of their way and let them fix it, trust
Yeah.
them to do it. So I think probably the combination of wanting to do that and then letting me, um, it just empowering them
Yes, that's a great advice. I'm glad
and
that you
allowing
asked
them
that
to do
question.
it and trying never to criticize, the things that now, if they were at the chair and they did something wrong and needed to correct something, I would do that. There was never a question about that
Mm.
professionally. And they expected me to do it because they knew if not a perfectionist, I really wanted things done right. So they respected that part. So we would do that. But in terms of them making a decision around the office or something, if I delegated it to them, that was their business, and I'd let that go.
Awesome.
Let me tell you a story.
Of
There was a
course.
turning point in my office with my staff that
Yeah.
really taught me something. Um, One day, one of my staff members had teenage boys, and they were both playing baseball. She went to Wanda, who was our boss, and said, Wanda, these kids are in baseball now, and if I don't see them play, I'll never get, if I don't leave in the afternoon to go see them play, I'll never get to see them play. So Wanda came to me. I said, what? Dentists, orthodontists call it green time a lot. That means the after school time when you're really busy, you see the most patients and you try and get as many people in after school as you can. And that's just sort of sacred time. You don't miss work then.
Yeah.
Well, that's when she wanted to be off, is to go during that time. And Wanda told me, and I just go, oh, what am I going to do about that? Because this girl, I love her to death. And I just, I want to make her happy. I want to please her, but this is just, you don't leave during after school time. And I thought about it a while and I said, Wanda, I'll tell you what you do. You go to the staff and you talk to them and you say, if you girls can work it out among each other and you can cover for each other and make sure everything gets done that needs to be done, then you can do that. And so I allowed those, and they did that. And one of the staff members who had coached baseball and had two kids playing softball, she coached for years. She went to one of her her daughter's games, and she showed up there and she saw the daughter, and the daughter's face was, oh my God. And she went to her with tears in her eyes and said,
Oh,
Mom, you've never come to one of my games before. And man, when I heard that, I said, wow, have I really done the right thing? And that just, I think that changed pretty so much in our staff that I allowed them to do things and they made it work. I let them have the responsibility and it didn't make a hitch in the office. They covered everything. It always worked. It never interfered with what we did. So when one wanted to be off, they would cover for them. So that's a long story for it. You may edit it out, whatever, but that was a huge thing that made such an impression on me. And they, I remember having tears in my eyes,
well,
when
you
I
lent them
heard
so
her.
much trust and you empowered them
Uh,
so much. And the fact that they
well,
took that and were, responsible and actually did the right thing. I mean, it
and
went
this
both
young
ways.
woman who had the daughter worked for another dentist, and
Hmm.
she'd have to work till 6 o'clock. And after, she was worried silly because she wouldn't get to the daycare in time because the doctor was making them work late every day and they never could miss. So if there was ever anybody who appreciated it, it was this young woman.
Wow.
It was a that that's the sort of thing. If you can do that for your staff, I think there's a lot of loyalty that can come from that.
Absolutely. Well, how would you say you've built such a strong reputation in the community?
Well, it wasn't from other dentists. You know, I don't know, honestly. I think for years of doing it, lots of patients, always, I guess, trying to always do the right thing.
Just
Just
showing your integrity by your actions.
just doing the right thing. There were times when you could do this, that, or the other, and maybe get a few more patients. But I really just tried to treat people right. And there were times when patients would come in and mom had been told that they really needed to do this, they really needed it to do right now. And if they didn't do this, something bad would happen. And I'd tell them, I don't see that. I think, that's not all that important and not necessary. And if you really don't want to do that, kiddo's going to be okay. And there were times when I basically talked people out of treatment, and I got more good PR from that than I might have from doing something.
Wow.
They were very appreciative and said, "Boy, I really appreciate you being honest with me." So I think that was
So it was
always
really establishing that trust, and you got known. You
yeah.
could
Well,
be
that's the
trusted
way I
with that.
always have been. I wanted to try to start from the beginning and treat people right, and I think that comes what goes around comes around, kind of. And
Yeah,
years of
absolutely.
doing it, I did it for a long time.
Well, so you're in practice 50 years. What was the role of technology in your practice? Because you probably seen it change a lot from the beginning
Yeah,
to
I
the end.
loved it. I always embraced anything new. So for me, that's one thing my staff had to understand. I told them the worst thing I can hear in my office is we've always done it that way. Uh, so so they were used to me coming back in and changing things or coming up with something new. So, and when I quit, I feel like all the latest technology we were doing, 3D scanners, 3D printers, doing what we call in-house aligners like Invisalign. I had the technology where I could do, I could scan patients and make aligners to straighten their teeth without using a third party company. And in fact, I gave a talk at my alumni meeting this last year. And they asked me to do this. And the topic was emerging technologies. And here I am, the oldest one in the room, giving a talk on the newest technology. So they kind of got a kick out of that. I think they
Yeah.
chose me because it's like, well, if he can do it, anybody can do it. But I've always
Were there
liked
any game changers for you that are come to mind?
the earliest one was that back when we were kids, not before your time, braces, you could have any kind of braces you wanted as long as they were silver and wrapped
Uh,
around your teeth.
yeah.
And so you'd have bands around all the teeth, and that's what I was taught. So the first big, huge thing was what we call direct bonding, where they developed a way that you could actually glue things to the surface of the teeth. Enamel is one of the hardest things around, and gluing to it was impossible. And I remember when I was in school, there were professors that were studying barnacles, how barnacles attached to things because they had such strong glues. I remember him doing that. And a fella came along and developed a way to what they call etch teeth, make them a little rougher on the surface where glue would adhere. And then we could put braces right directly on the surface of the teeth as opposed to having to wrap it around the whole tooth,
Oh, wow.
taking up space between the teeth and so on. So that was one of the first really, really big ones. There were a number of other ones. The 3D technology that's going on right now has been, I'd say, at least as big and maybe bigger as time goes on. It's still rather new, but possibilities with it are just endless. They're coming. This last meeting we went to, my alumni association, like I say, was emerging technologies, and there were a number of different things that they were showing that were just mind blowing. Where computers do a lot of the design of the braces and so on. A little technical for us right now to get into, but the 3D stuff and scanning and all that has really been phenomenal.
Yeah, I think even dental monitoring is pretty amazing. That this scanning,
Yeah,
some of this can be
dental
done now by the
monitoring is a
phone,
new
and you
one,
can.
which I thought was crazy at first until I found out about it, and then realized, yes, you could uh, perhaps even do a better job seeing the patients less if by monitoring now, and you may include that with other things you're talking about, but monitoring meaning patient taking photos of their own mouth with a special attachment on the phone. And that will give it enables us to get 3D pictures of the mouth, which a remote technician can look at, and they can track whether the teeth are moving exactly as they should be. And they can monitor whether or not a patient is doing what they should be doing, whether or not they need to come in or not. If they've got braces on, it can tell if they're loose or too dirty, or the teeth are not moving right. And if everything's going perfectly, they may be able to go a long time between appointments and just be monitored. And it saves time for the parent and the number of times a kid misses school. So that's an example, yes, of one that is new that I had not embraced yet. We're just Dr. Marsh has done some of that, and I'm sure we'll be doing more of it. But I think it's very, very promising.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what qualities do you think make a great orthodontist? How did you employ some of those in your practice?
Curiosity, persistence, loving mechanical types of things,
Mm.
wanting to help people, caring about people. Um, I taught at the university for 31 years part time. Some orthodontists graduated without quite the same skills as some others. But what I always felt like and told them was it's the one who cared the most who would become the best. Because if they looked at their finished cases and they would say, well, that doesn't look quite right, and then they would study harder and figure out why it was that didn't look just right. Then they could correct that and become better on the next case. A person who is only interested in how many patients they could see and seeing how fast they could see them and didn't pay attention to those things would never really improve. They may have been very good, but if they're too busy to spend the time to really look at the patients and care about them, they're not going to get better. In fact, they'll get worse. So I think I'd say that's a moral issue or ethical issue. Um, but it starts with the orthodontist really caring about what they want. Also, too, some people just have an inherent ability to understand mechanical things. Dr. Marsh, I was just so surprised, not surprised, let's say, but so pleased when I first met him because within a week or so, I knew he got it. He's one
Yeah.
of those residents, and I didn't teach him. He was taught actually by two instructors in San Antonio that were residents of mine at Chapel Hill. So I knew both of these guys and I knew they were both good, and they both knew him when he was in school. And we all agreed that Spencer was about the top of the heap, that he really understands mechanical things, loves it, and it's just intuitive for him. Whereas for other people, it's just not. So plus, on top of it, he's got a cotton picking personality to beat the band, and the girls think he's pretty good looking. And I'm gonna leave out the
Okay.
girls, but
Oh,
he's pretty good.
is there anything else you think sets Dr. Marsh apart, and why do you think he's a good fit to take over the practice?
he went through a situation in another practice that he wasn't very pleased with, and I have to agree with him that he wasn't treated as well as he might have been treated. And I think he's so cotton picking happy right now to have a staff that he considers really well trained, like I do, and a staff that really cares about what they're doing, and an atmosphere, well, like Dr. Murray, is not going to nitpick and second guess, and he's not going to tell him how to do things. So he's just darn happy about being in an atmosphere like that. That he's just happy as a clam, doing what he's doing right now, and that's the way it ought to be. You know, when I started off, I would see patients, and I had done something different the last time I saw them, and I had to get up from what I was doing and go over and look and see if what I'd done had actually worked. And that's kind of where he is now, just really excited about, getting in there and doing it and seeing it work.
Is there any advice you would give Dr. Marsh on his new role and what he should do to kind of keep the reputation going in the practice? No?
No. He's heard me talk about the things that I've talked about here today as far as staff goes. Mm-hmm. As far as treatment goes, he doesn't need any help with that. He's got it. I mean, he's good. What he doesn't know, he will learn and pick up on his own. As far as staff goes, if he will just listen and learn from my staff and from my stories, I think he can avoid some mistakes that he might have made otherwise. But he's a good person, and I feel like he's just pretty well got it. So I don't think I need to give him any more advice. I think he's in good shape.
Awesome.
I admire him, and I think maybe it goes the other way too, and that's great.
So, well, why did you decide to sell the practice? What was it about Dr. Murray and MyOrthodontist that you thought it made a good fit?
I'm 80. And, as much as I liked what I did, and I, at one point, had no idea about quitting, I realized that it was irresponsible of me not to have a transition plan at my age. The impact of something happening to me where I couldn't practice, and having a staff without a job and patients without a doctor would have been traumatic enough to where it would have been a real issue. So even if I were to want to continue on, I felt it was irresponsible not to have a transition plan. And, and it got to the point where I figured, well, that's a long time, and during COVID, I had 2 months off. And I realized, whoa, it's kind of fun. I like being off. And I built a boat during that time, and my wife and I got along well, and she didn't hate me and I didn't hate her. And so I said, well, maybe that's not too bad. I'd asked my cardiologist not too long before that, do you think it's crazy for a guy my age to consider continuing on to practice? And I thought one point I might just practice till the patients went away. And realized that really wasn't the way to do it. Practice was in good shape. We had a nice staff and everything was going well. And it just made more sense to let someone, take it over, and my staff still have a good job. And so a lot of it I did for my staff and my patients, so they were well taken care of.
So why did you think MyOrthodontist was a good fit to take over the practice?
Well, Larry started off, there are a lot of these MSO, DSOs, and all these corporations buying it now. It's kind of everywhere, veterinary practice, medical practice, and so on. So it's not an unusual thing. What's unusual with Larry is he got out of training, and he right away decided he was going to do things differently. And at first, I didn't think much of it because it was so different. My model was have one office and take care of your patients, do it yourself. His model was to do something different. And at first I thought, well, I don't know about that. But what's happened is he was so far ahead of things. He had a vision before all these other people started doing it. Now, anytime something like this new comes up, there are going to be mistakes made. You know, you're going to do things wrong here and there, and you're going to have the wrong model. Larry started it long enough ago where he's worked those things out. He's got a staff that he obviously pays very well. They're really sharp. So his management staff are really dynamite people. Um, the lady who introduced me to the idea, of course, I've known Larry for 30 something years. She said, well, what about Larry? You know, and I said, well, I don't know about that. And she said something about Larry. She said, well, I believe he's really more interested in doing good for patients and his staff than he is in making a lot of money. And I thought, yeah, sure. You know, I believe that. Now, once I've seen what he's done, I thought my staff was well paid, and I think they were all very happy. But he paid my staff the same thing that I'd paid them, and then added on top of that medical insurance and other benefits. Now,
Yeah.
that's a chunk of change. I said, whoa, that is really generous. So, and he doesn't do that just for fun. He has seen it work out, evidently. He's had experience doing this for 20 something years, and he's learned, through his management people and experience, how to make this work. So I'd say that's what sold me on it with Larry, is knowing him. And then I talked to a number of doctors who worked for him, some of whom I knew that I trained in residency, and they all had good things to say. They said, Larry really cares about us, and he cares about the practices, and he's really trying to do the right thing. So, I think that's probably the main
Yeah.
reason.
That's I really feel the same way. As the more I get to know him, the more I think his priority really is helping people before everything
I really
else.
think so too. I think, he's been through some hard things himself, which may have affected him some too, which we all have by my age. All of us have experienced some things that weren't much fun. And Larry's been through some of them, but I think he really just cares about people. He cares about his staff. So, and I feel very good about that. So if it's a management type of company thing, other than one individual, and we've gotten to the point now, unfortunately, with school tuitions being so high
Yeah.
and dentists graduating with such tremendous debt, they can't afford to go in and buy a practice anymore. So Larry, in a sense, is providing opportunities for them to go into a very nice, well-equipped practice, even though they couldn't afford on their own to do that. So that, in a sense, is quite a favor to them to be able to have that. Otherwise, they'd be scratching along trying to get a practice starting, not having any patients, scrimping. I scrimped along with, the cheapest of equipment at first, just to get by,
Yeah.
because I didn't want to borrow money.
I can
I didn't have
understand
much
that.
debt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people did it that way in the past, and I honestly admire that because
Well, that was
everyone
the
has so
model.
much
When I
debt
got
now.
out of orthodontic school, there were 12 of us in my orthodontic class.
Yeah.
Everybody but me was starting a practice. I
Hmm.
went into the military because it was Vietnam time and I'd signed up. So I was the only one who didn't start a practice.
Oh, wow.
Nowadays, nobody as an orthodontist goes out and starts their own practice. And
Wow.
then I started one 2 years later. So these days it's just unheard of almost for an orthodontist to start on their own, which makes a situation for me that it wasn't possible really to sell to one individual. Um, so it's worked out very nicely to be able to work with Larry on that.
Do you envision your practice evolving in a certain way or head in any direction in the future? Is there something you wish for it?
No, I don't really, because it's totally out of my control now. I think, I hope that the ethical standards that were there during the time I was there are maintained, because I think that's kind of the bedrock of what makes practice good is caring about people and caring about doing the right thing. And if they do that, everything else is going to work out okay. A lot of ways to straighten teeth and different ways of doing it, but if you've got good heart and you care about people, then the rest of it can work out just fine. I mean, I'm sure it will. Uh, Spencer Marsh is top notch. I'd pick him out of a million. He's that good. So and he'll do well. And I
Awesome.
hope he sticks with doing what he's doing for a long time and stays right there doing it, because he's super.
Well, Dr. Booth, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed hearing your story.